Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
Here.
Townsend.
Present.
McKiernan.
Here.
Walker.
Present. Here. For those in the audience, Commissioner Townsend has joined us by telephone and is considered present at the meeting. Approval of the minutes. Next we have the proposed minutes from June 5th, our June 5th meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve as submitted.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. We have two items before us. The first item consists of land bank business. Mr. Slaughter, if you'll take it from here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good evening to everybody. We'll get right to it. There's an on button.
Oh.
It works. First, we have three transfers that we're asking to transfer to the land bank. 1714, 1720 South 15th Street, currently in the Board of Commissioners' name.
Your neighborhood.
2016 West 36th Avenue, City of Kansas City, Kansas. The first two are properties. They're outlined here in black. Hopefully everybody can see it there. They're proposed properties that would be part of the Rosedale Transmission Line Project. So Public Works has just asked that the land bank take them. We'll put them on hold, not make them available for sale. And the other property is right here on the corner, here in red, and the property owner next to it, who also has a yard extension application tonight, is requesting that property. So we are requesting that those be transferred to the land bank.
Any questions?
Second.
Motion and second. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Roll call. Walker. Walters, I'm sorry.
Aye.
Murguia.
Aye.
Townsend. Commissioner Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye. We have applications.
We have 9 applications. I know your packet indicated 11. 2 we are not going to present. We're going to ask that they just be taken off, and that is 819 South Valley and 1235 Taylor. Those will not be presented tonight. All applicants are current on their taxes and have no code violations. First one is for yard extension 1415 North 26th Street. It's outlined. It's in red. The applicant's property is in black. Next is 1042 Walker Avenue, and the church controls all that property, and this is the last little slither there that we got out of the tax sale. 339 North 32nd Street. Again, applicant in black, land bank in red. 2711 North 9th Street. That is this property here. The applicant owns the house here. The applicant is also asking for a yard extension for this property here that we'll get to in a minute. 930 Reynolds Avenue. These two properties are owned by the applicant, and there's the land bank property. 2016 West 36, that's the transfer we just discussed. Now property acquisition, the applicant lives here at 1216 Taylor. These are the two, 1222, 1224 Pennsylvania Avenue. This again is one we mentioned earlier. The applicant lives down here. They're wanting this property for yard extension and this for property acquisition. And so the advisory board also met, and they were fine and asked that they be forward for full approval. And that is also our recommendation.
Commissioners have any comments or questions?
I just have one question. Mr. Slaughter, on the 1222 and 1224 Pennsylvania properties, you said that Ms. Arriaga lives at 1216?
Yes, and she is in attendance. I could have her come up to the podium.
When I look in LandsWeb, that's not the name I see there. And so is it titled in another name?
From CIC's standpoint, it is, the 1216 Taylor is in her name.
I am Camelia Arriaga. Also, it's on my maiden name, Camille or Camelia Dean Arriaga.
Oh, that's who's at 1216 then.
Camelia Dean.
All right, so you live at 1216, but you also own 1230?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And you want these because they're effectively out your front door?
Across the street, and we've been maintaining it for numerous years, and the land bank or UG hasn't been the one mowing the grass and keeping it up to date. It looks practically like a park.
And I take it the gentleman who owns that little triangle there at Taylor in Pennsylvania is maintaining that?
We are.
Oh, you maintain the corner as well?
We do. The entire corner, the sidewalk where the sidewalk should be, everything right there in the corner.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That's all the questions I have.
There's no other questions, a motion would be appropriate.
Move to approve all as submitted.
Okay, we've had motion and second. No further discussion. Clerk, read the roll.
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Argia?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Walker?
Aye.
Next, we have two donations to the land bank, 1329 Washington Avenue and 2219 South Furry Street. Here's an aerial of the one on Washington. As you can see, it's outlined here in black. Land bank already controls this property here. Mr. Berrigan had a house there that was demolished, and his whole point was he lives out of state, doesn't want it, or he would try to sell it, but he didn't think he'd be able to get anybody to buy it. So that's why he made his request for us to accept it as a donation.
So the property in question is the one outlined in black.
Yes, sir.
What's the frontage on that? That's a tiny.
I would imagine 25, just from looking at it. But we could combine the two and just make it one property.
Okay.
Any questions?
And
You have the other one, I'm sorry.
the other one, it's a heavily wooded area. You can barely see it here, but it's kind of here and then it slants a little bit, but this is the property. I drove by the other day, last week, and you know, it's a prime candidate for a vault. Just throw it in the land bank. It's delinquent, and I believe if we don't get it now, I'm sure it's going to be in a tax. So it's only 1 year delinquent, but again, they've indicated that they have no desire to keep it.
This is another one where we were speaking a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, about ones where maintenance isn't really necessary. This is a wooded area, so if someone would dump or something in this area, we'd obviously want to maintain it as the UG, but otherwise, if it's treed, it just becomes a neighborhood amenity for having trees and so on and so forth. It's not something we'd mow.
Okay. You want to make a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second. Could we have the roll call, please?
Roll call, Walters. Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Next, we are going to discuss the NRSA hold area. And I know you guys have been in on presentations about what this is all about, so I'm not going to rehash that. But obviously, it's a area of interest that not only the land bank, but the unified government has taken strong interest in. Great opportunity through some of the measures in SOAR to really put some of the practices that we're starting to preach about, I guess, for lack of better words. But so really the ask is that the land bank property would not be available for sale. Now, if someone came and they wanted to build a house on one of these lots, we would definitely entertain that, and we would probably eventually bring that before you. But you would still need to approve those. Other than that, the land, like I said, they would stay not available for sale. There are numerous unified government controlled that we're also asking we just get those transferred into the land bank as well. And they will be listed as hold on the inventory list on our website.
Where is that? I can't read the map.
And I believe you have one also right in front of you, to your left.
So the area is generally bounded by basically 15th, 16th Street on the east. It follows the line of Central Avenue across to Orville on the north, and then jogs back down around 38th, 37th Street there, incorporates City Park, and follows the line of I-70 right away.
So we're holding it, we're keeping people from purchasing this property because,
Well, the point of the NRSA project is for prime development. And so obviously we want to help with that by holding this property. I will say it's not really we don't get a lot of applications for this area. But really the point is instead of bringing a property acquisition because somebody wants to put a garden there, we really want to just hold it for development, whether it be a single family house, maybe some sort of commercial. I know there's been some discussions before about the heavy saturated area right here with that's a lot of land bank property. But I'm not the lead person on this project, but you
is
know.
there someone marketing it?
I would say not at this point, other than just our regular lists and the website.
So we're,
Part of the NRSA program, we're actually looking at how we bring jobs into the area, looking at our housing opportunities. So we're just starting to dive, and knowing that we had a concentration of these properties in this area, we wanted to be able to have an opportunity to explore with our partners on the NRSA what might be done. Without having an opportunity to do so, if one got picked off in the middle of the red, let's say on here, it makes it harder to bring a package for possible job growth or opportunities in this area. So we just thought it's an opportunity to look at something. If we can't figure out what that would be, we'll certainly release them back out into the land bank for anyone for a yard extension, et cetera.
how long will we hold them for?
Period of this application is the next couple of months. We'll have it turned in. If it gets approved, then this is a 5-year program. And in that 5 years, we better have an idea of what we're trying to do.
And Commissioner, I would say this kind of parallels what we've been doing with the strategy in Douglas Sumner. We really have been kind of holding those, other than if we get the single family. I know we've gotten some along, like 7th in Oakland with CHWC has produced and stuff. So it's really kind of what we're doing is, it's not completely unavailable, but we're hoping that a single family build or some sort of development's attached to these asks.
Look. No, I mean, I see this as a good place as any to try this. Mayor isn't here to tell me to turn on my microphone. I see this as good a place to start with the, an expanded view of the role of the land bank in bringing economic development. And I mean it when I say good luck. I would love to see some major changes to the housing stock, perhaps some, small commercial enterprises. Maybe the vision is even bigger than that, but whatever it is, I can't think of a better place to start. There are certainly other places where this could be beneficial if it if it proves out to be a worthy undertaking. So, do we have any questions from any of the commissioners? Okay.
I have one.
All right.
I have one.
Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. Just so it's clear, we're looking at a hold for 5 years. To remove the hold, would a developer have to come with a plan that would encompass all of these properties or only some, or how would they go about taking the hold off if they just had portions of this area for development?
Commissioner, this is Melissa Sieben, County Administration. At this point, what we're working on is developing a plan for this area. That's part of what the NRSA is all about, is actually having an intentional plan. As we start into this, we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to work with the neighborhood to meet their desires and their dreams. So really right now that we don't have an answer for that other than to say we know that we have a lot of assets that we own or have the ability to put together for an opportunity to possibly create jobs or a new type of housing stock into this market in this area of town. And that's why we're requesting this at this time. And if we aren't accepted as an NRSA and the commission doesn't want to further hold these areas, they can be released as soon as later this fall or whenever we hear from HUD, or if they want to continue to pursue it, because as Commissioner Walker noted, it might be a really great area for some kind of economic engine, then that would be what staff would present regardless of the HUD approval or not.
So when you say HUD approval, is NRSA this designated area where they would like to see lower income housing built?
Actually, the neat thing about an NRSA is some of those restrictions or requirements by HUD are actually waived as part of this. So it's not your typical percentage. It actually allows for a lesser, I think it's either 51% or less of any units to have to be low mod. So there's a lot more flexibility by getting the designation that allows you to create that socioeconomic diversity that these neighborhoods are needing to stabilize them. So we're actually looking at this from the SOAR perspective of how do we stabilize our neighborhoods so that we can reoccupy some of the ones that are not contiguous with houses in that area that maybe are market rate or better.
In that area, though, isn't market rate low to mod?
At this point, yes.
So are we trying to raise the market value? And we're going to do that with more low to mod?
Well, I didn't say that housing was our only option. We actually, jobs is a significant part of the NRSA area, is creating jobs. So this is one area where we thought we could look at doing that. But without divulging too much further and possibly stymieing things, I don't know what else to say at this point. We don't have anything on the table. We just know we have land that is contiguous that we could look at for opportunities. And it may turn out to be we're not doing anything there.
Okay, anything else? Nope.
The acronym NRSA again stands for what? I must have overlooked that in my reading. What does that stand for actually again?
Neighborhood strategic or neighborhood revitalization strategic area. Okay, it's just another HUD acronym.
We certainly have no shortage of acronyms. All right. If anybody have anything else? If not, a motion one way or the other would be appropriate.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion and second. Please call the roll.
Roll call, Walters. Murgia.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye. Thank you. That ends all the items on item 1. Now we have item 2, which is a land bank policy update. And Mr. Slaughter.
Thank you. We're going to discuss kind of how we're doing the rehab program and the approval process that's currently in place. And then we have a suggestion on maybe a way to quicken things a little bit. So right now, once we take a property into possession, board it, secure it, inspect it, we will then put offers out to our rehab contracting pool. And then if we select one, we will then enter in negotiations with them. Then we bring it to standing committee, assuming we get it in at the deadline to submit to be on this agenda. If it's approved there, then of course it goes to a commission meeting, and then we go ahead and close on the property, and they start the rehab. The challenges with that is, again, the deadlines, the schedule of these meetings. Today we had 6 houses. Offers were due at 4 o'clock. And we'll touch on when those eventually would have reached your guys's, when they would have come here for approval. The time frame, again, as you'll see, can be pretty staggering. We have them secured. We feel very confident that they are very secure, but that gives opportunities for people to come and break in and squat. Winter's coming up. People look for a place a little bit warmer than outside. So here's the proposed new process. We'll still have the negotiations. At that point, we're then going to propose a memo to the county administrator. We will detail everything that led up to the solicitation, how many offers we had, the negotiations, the details of the agreement, how long will we turn around and give them to complete the project, basic information like that we would be presenting to you guys. If he approves it, we will go ahead and close. We will start the rehab, and then at the next available meeting, we will report those results to you guys. The benefits of this new thing is, of course, time. We generally are 12 days from the time we have to submit our agenda items until we get to standing committee. We average 10 to 17 days from standing committee to a full commission meeting for land bank. That's not including fast track. So right there is roughly almost 3 to 4 weeks, so where our property's just sitting there and not being rehabbed. Here's a current example. Again, we had it should be 6 properties. One we didn't put offers out yet. So we had the open house, the deadline, this is a new example. We'll have 7 properties that we're going to show on Friday, this coming Friday. We'll have those deadlines be, I don't even know my dates. The offer deadline was today, I apologize. So we had the 6 properties in today. The deadline for next month's meeting is the 30th of this month. We would present them on September 11th. The commission meeting is September 28th. 52 days, 7 weeks and 3 days at the current process. We are already starting to see rehabbers in our pool that can blow that time frame away of just getting the rehab done. So here's the proposed changes in your policy, and you should have this in your packets. In 7.3, we are adding the phrase that references the rehab program to distinguish it. In 7.4, we're giving a little bit more information on the conveyance pursuant to the rehab program. It outlines the information about kind of what we just covered there. the memo to the county administrator. And then 7.6, in our policy, if you get something for yard extension, property acquisition, that type of stuff, or in the past, everything, we've said 180 days to convey it, or we keep it and your award is void. So we just basically added language that will kind of separate the rehab, just in case maybe through faults not of the rehabbers, but it may take a little bit longer to get the property right, conveyed, and get the rehab started. So that's it. I'll stand for questions on that.
Commissioner Murguia.
Does the policy tell us what dollar amount the county administrator can go up to in negotiating the acquisition of the house?
No, because generally the Board of Trustees has the approval. So really what we're doing is asking the Board of Trustees to approve the county administrator to take on that role.
So he has carte blanche to pay whatever he wants to for.
Well, he's not paying anything, Land Bank's not paying anything. They're paying us for the house, and then when it's done, it's theirs.
So he's just determining the sale price?
That's part of the information that would be given, but it's no different than if we came to you guys and said we had, like we've done the last couple months, here's a house, here's who's going to rehab it, here's the time frame, the amount, the details of it, and then you guys, if you approve it here, it goes to full commission for final approval, and then we pretty much close on the property. But as you can see, sometimes it could be significantly longer. So we're just thinking if we had a way that if the county administrator was okay with what we presented, then we'll go ahead and use that as the starting point and then come back and report those results to you guys.
So a couple of examples. These are properties that we have already done our due diligence on or touched in some way. So one way that a property could get to this point, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we've had a couple of banks that have donated properties to us. Then we've put them out for rehabilitation, correct? And so this would simply, once we have approved the acquisition or the transfer, the donation of that property to the UG, then this process would just get it into the bid and transfer to a rehabber without having to come back here.
Yeah, and maybe we jumped the gun a little bit. The second part of this presentation is actually bringing those addresses to you. So every time we have a tax sale, let's use a tax sale for example, and we decide that when it's all said and done, there's 10 properties, 10 houses that we're going to obtain, then what we'll do at the next available standing committee is we'll come to you with those addresses saying we want to bring those, put those into the rehab program. And then, of course, the approval process, if you approve it tonight and hopefully on Thursday, will be that we turn around and then just can start right in once we have a negotiated agreement that the county administrator feels comfortable with.
So all of these properties, we would have done our due diligence here and as a full commission before they get to this state, at which the administrator can then just move it forward administratively, and then you report back to us what's happened.
Correct.
And so in terms of the rehabbers, we have a list of criteria. We published the list of qualifying criteria. Anybody can become part of the pool if they meet our...
Correct. We have it on our website. We currently have some website issues, but anybody can come into our office and get it. Also note, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock in the Commission Chamber, we're doing a presentation. There was an advertisement for that in the UG Citizen newsletter that just went out, I think about a month ago. So hopefully we'll get a good turnout on that, provide more people to get in the pool. And then, yes, we'll get these properties in, we'll make them available, and, you know, we'll just hopefully continue to see this program grow and grow.
As I'm thinking about this one process, there was a house, it was on Merriam Lane, I think, 2 young men, residential somebody, did a great job on turning that house over. And so so that house came to us, I think, from Bank of America, and we approved it here. So this process would then just cut the amount of time between when we approved acquiring that property and when a developer, whether it's them or someone else, could start work on that property.
That's correct.
Okay.
The idea here is the less amount of time these sit in our hands as actual structures, the better off we are, because we are responsible while they're in our hands for the safety, the mowing, and all of those things that come along with homeownership. And if we can turn them out more quickly than 2 months or whatever we can do to cut that time down is a benefit to their neighbors, and it's a benefit to our tax base because those get back out on the market more quickly with a value more than what they were when they were brought into the land bank.
Commissioner?
So just so people are clear, and maybe I'm not clear, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're doing, Chris, is you're seeing houses out there in the neighborhoods with potential that are coming into the potential for rehab, that are coming into the land bank. We're going ahead and accepting them, which we haven't done in the past.
Correct.
Right? So we're accepting them. And then when you put them out for bid, you're putting them out not just for bid on the rehabilitation of them, but they're actually put out for bid for the rehabber to acquire from the land bank based on the improvements that they're going to make with their own money, correct?
Correct. They'll submit a budget. They'll give us a plan. We stay owner of the property during the whole process. We file their agreement so they have an equitable interest. And then when it's all said and done and we're satisfied, the inspectors are satisfied, we deed ourselves off. They can keep it and rent it. They can sell it, make money. And what we tell them is hopefully you're coming back and getting another one.
Right. This is just what I don't want the general public to think. I don't want the general public to think we've set aside millions of dollars of taxpayer dollars to rehab
No, we have not.
land bank. Right. So we have not done that. All we're doing is we're accepting the property for free as a donation. We're evaluating those properties on their ability to be rehabilitated. And then really all we're doing is we're sort of putting them out for RFP to say, hey, if you think you can fix this up and you want to take responsibility for it and resell it, you know, you can apply to us. But there are no tax dollars going into these houses. This is fair market investment. We're just working as the catalyst to get this blighted, dilapidated, tax delinquent property in the hands of a quality developer, correct?
I think Chris actually sees himself as a marketer now. He's got to figure out how to market these homes. So that's really our interest, is in getting interest in helping revitalize our community.
And I will say there is some dollars that do go in through the land bank just to get them initially boarded and secured and presentable. But yeah, we're not paying these guys to rehab. They're paying us to basically, we feel, get a great opportunity to do what they do, and hopefully they continue to do. And
the unified government is not rehabbing houses.
No, we're securing them and for the neighborhood until such time as a private person or business takes interest in rehabbing them.
Great. I just wanted that to be clear.
Yep, no, that's very clear. We're not in the business of that.
Before they come to us, I mean, before they would go to a rehabber, we've done our due diligence as a unified government. We've done sufficient noticing. If it's gone through the tax sale, there's been all of that legal process has played out. And then in terms of accepting one as a donation, it's come to us and then to full commission. I like the fact that we've done our due diligence on the front end and now expedite getting those out into the hands of people who can then turn them.
And like I mentioned earlier, right now we have one in the process that is probably going to be completed in 30 days. I mean, 30 days. You guys have all seen these houses. They're in your neighborhoods. And the fact that, you know, even as long as a year ago, some of us were probably, how do we handle these? How do we do it? So we feel we're attracting the right group of I don't want to say rehabbers to come in. That's what we're calling them. And, you know, we hope to be coming to this standing committee in the future saying, here's one, here's two, here's 4 or 5 more that have completed the process. Here's the results, and we'll be bringing back more.
This goes back to your piano key issue, Commissioner McKiernan. With each one of these, we raise the value in a neighborhood because we, 1, have it be occupied again, and 2, have remediate code issues. And Chris, how many of them are we bulldozing versus rehabbing? Because we are bringing structures into the land bank, and we will knock them down. So
I'd say we're sitting at maybe like 5-to-1 rehab to demo.
Are you refusing anyone?
Right now, the last request we made to the administrator, we pretty much just asked everything that was a no sale at the last tax sale come in, and he granted that. So we feel that,
No, Chris, what I'm asking.
like if it needs to be demoed,
If I have a piece of property, I don't, but if I did have a piece of property and I wanted to donate it to the unified government, are you refusing to take it from anyone?
we haven't done that so far. We figure if it's a property that needs to come down as far as demolition goes, it may make the demolition department's process easier if we're the controlling owner of that versus still being in the public ownership. So
you have not?
we would definitely vet that with various departments to see if this is something we wanted to take on.
We don't have a robust donation program, if that's what you're talking about right now. Right now, we're only acquiring these through tax sale primarily. I mean, that's what really is bringing this conversation forward, is bringing structures from the tax sale to the land bank. But 2.0 and 3.0 land bank contemplates more specifically what you're talking about. I would say your donations of land to date are just land, not structure, for the most part.
Other than the bank donated properties, we really never received.
And we've had
I
two
haven't in the 8+
those.
years I've been that someone's requested to donate a house from the public, let's just say.
Yeah, we haven't been in that business to date. We are contemplating that business in the future, but we have to put the parameters together to bring to you to approve.
And I know in conversations with Erin over at Demo, she has said that a lot of people have put out that notion of, hey, could I just donate this even though maybe my proceeds are still going to pay for the demo or however that works. And I think it's something we should look into, but again, we just don't get much of those type of requests.
So do you need a motion on what you've brought forward so far?
Yes, and then the last part again will be the actual list of houses that we'll ask that you guys approve. Kind of saying, here's that overall list that, kind of what you were talking about earlier, of the properties that we currently have. And then as we go forward, so say we have the sale on Thursday this week, and when we get that list, we'll probably come back in September saying, here's the list of properties that we'll be bringing in that.
So let me make sure I understand. You need a motion to approve the changes to your policies and procedures that would allow the conveyance of properties we have acquired to be an administrative process through the county administrator's office with a report back to us the following month.
Correct. And then I guess the only other question would be is, would you guys want that on a, as it happens, or would it be a quarterly, or I guess we can discuss that at other times and stuff, but hopefully we're coming back each month with results.
For the time being, I'd say we let it stand at a monthly report.
And you will have months where you have none.
That's fine.
Yep.
All good. Consider
Mr.
that my
Chairman,
motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah,
Commissioner-
I do have some
Commissioner
questions, generally about this, not so much the timing of the reports, but for just the process on a bigger scale. I'm looking in the packet. There are about 48 properties that have been determined are right for this rehab program, which I think is great. Couple of questions. One, how again are we marketing these, and are we marketing them or going to only allow professional rehabbers, so to speak, to do these? Can individuals, if they show they have adequate resources, essentially come in and rehab one of these properties?
Commissioner, the only, I'll just call them people. The only people that are allowed to put in an offer, view these houses, are the people that have already gone through the qualification process and are in that pool. That pool is open to anybody as long as they can meet the qualifications and express to us that they have an experience rehabbing properties. So if they meet the qualifications, we put them in the pool. When the next set of open houses come in, we'll invite them. We also, upon their request, will gladly show them any properties that currently have not received an offer on that we're still holding. But it's just not right now open to the public.
Okay. You mentioned open house. So with these 47 properties, whatever they are in the packet, are they all, do we plan an open house, or there's a process for an open house for the prospective rehabbers to take a look at all of these?
Correct. We have, I believe, 7 set starting tomorrow at 11. We emailed out to the group the addresses, the times they're allowed to come and view. Me and Mr. Brockman, we will open the property up, give them a chance to go in, assess it, take any measurements, any photographs they need, ask any questions. It's on to the next one, and then generally within the week we will send them the offers with the application and any other information necessary, and then we set a deadline. Like today was the deadline for those 6 properties, and then we just see what comes in.
Okay. So at some point, all 48 of these properties will be shown?
Unless we deem that it should be recommended for demolition, we will probably not make that an open house. But if we feel it's rehabable, yes, there'll at least be an open house. And then again, for people that may be coming in late, we'll still give an opportunity for properties that haven't, that didn't get any offers by their prospective deadlines. But yes, we can do that on an individual basis too.
So before the open houses are conducted, is that when the determinations will be made what are not salvageable, so to speak, what are candidates for demolition? I didn't realize that just being on this list doesn't mean they're safe from possible demolition.
The way we have it is, again, once we take ownership, we turn around and getting it boarded and secured is our #1 priority. And at that same time, Mr. Brockman will conduct a full inspection of the property. And generally, you know, if we're seeing some major foundation issues, we've had properties before come in that maybe half the roof is already collapsed in, stuff that are more of a safety issue. Those are generally the ones we'll recommend be put in the demolition program. And then if it's deemed for rehab, then we just, again, we issue out the open house date, and we go from there.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
How many of these have you done, Chris, already?
Let's see. I think we had, I'll just jump in, and we have received 4 donations. Again, there's the one, we had 1 demo. There's the property that was mentioned earlier by Commissioner McKiernan. It was Residential Revivals, the group that came in and did just an outstanding job. Tax sale 335. Oh, I'm sorry. We received 6 properties out of that, 3 which demoed, 2 are under contract. If we have an open house and we don't get any offers, we just call it a strategic hold. So that's just our little land bank lingo. And then 336, which was the tax sale in December, we received 37 properties. 4 of those have been demoed. And then we had secured 29, and then you see the open houses. And then we just received 17 from the April tax sale. So I apologize, I don't believe I put a total, but 17, 54, 60 of those, and there's maybe 5 to 7 that we're holding for demo.
Just as a reminder, we're determining, the unified government's determining whether or not they're rehabable, right?
Correct.
And then we're putting them out for bid.
Correct.
And then on these 29 that you boarded and secured and that you've already had the open house on, did any of them not get bid on?
Yes, we have some of those.
And so remind me, I know you've said all this, but it's a lot of information at one time. So then say I'm making the number up. You got bids on 20, but didn't on 9. Those 9 stay in the land bank? And do we demo them, or do we just leave them boarded up?
Our thought is we keep increasing this contractor pool, we'll still have opportunities for new people to look at property that we don't have offers on. We get that question a lot. What do you have out available? I'd love to have a ability on our website to have pictures of these with some information attached to those. We're just not there yet. But, you know, ideally, we feel that if it's not demoed, we can get it marketed and get to somebody. We're just trying to grow that supply of contractors because we feel we have the demand of the properties of the ones, especially the ones that don't sell at the tax sale.
Do you know the real number on the 29 you boarded and secured? You have 8 in process, but how many did not get bid on out of the 29?
Well, out of the 29, we've only had 14 open houses, so we still have 15 more that we'll probably turn around, and we have 7 more. That's a typo. That red should be, we have 7 open houses on the 14th, and then again, we still have like 15 more that we're in the process of, or I think we still have 8 more that we haven't even started the boarding and securing on.
So how many open houses have you had?
We've had, I'd say, let's say 20.
Out of the 29?
Out of probably the...
No, this is everything on this slide that he's talking about. So the numbers aren't going to add up easily.
Kind of a gradual process.
Out of the 29 boarded and secured structures, see where it says that 29 boarded and secured. Out of those 29, how many of those have been to open house?
7
Only 7
so far.
And out of those 7, how many were bid on?
That deadline was 4 o'clock today, so
You don't know.
I could have that answer for you tomorrow. I don't believe all 7 or 6 of them. It says 7, but it's really 6. I don't believe all 6 got an offer, but I think 4 out of the 6 did.
Okay. Just curious.
Sure.
The level of interest.
Well, I think this is something that it's a good strategic start. If we decide it's not going to work and we end up not being able to put them through, then we change our policy. But I think one of the problems we've had historically is that some people who might otherwise acquire a property can't get into it if it's not their property. So this does allow them the opportunity to get in and look at the property.
Correct.
Allows us the opportunity to get in and look at it and see if we deem it safe for rehab.
The other thing is from a safety perspective, because SOAR is about appearance and safety. So the appearance is better because, one, we're boarding it at a level that it wasn't before. In fact, we have a totally different standard for ones that come into the land bank than we currently do for private vacants, and we're working towards that new standard. Money is involved. But the other thing that is happening is that Chris's team is also making sure that the outsides appear better. So we have an entire standard there that we're working off of, from mowing, cutting back brush, things of that nature, because one, we got to show them to get people interested in them, but two, we want to help the neighborhood as we actually physically own them.
Well, I don't want to jump the gun on this, but I just want to make sure that kind of alludes to what Brian was talking about earlier and why I was asking the number of homes that were bid on and the number that was not. Because some areas of the urban core, this program might work really well for. So I disagree a little bit, Brian, in that we have to do away with the program because in one area of our urban core it doesn't work and in another area it does.
Totally agree.
Yeah, so I hope we're also tracking areas that this program is successful in.
I will add, and I think it's important to know, we're just getting what's left over at the tax sale. Now, in going forward with this program, we have been more strategic in the property we requested to be put in the tax sale. But again, we can't control who bids on property at the tax sale. So now if we can just saturate some of these sales with maybe some of our targeted areas and stuff, then maybe we can have some more strategic results. But we have some properties that even us at staff, we feel may be challenging in getting something there, but that's nothing with the house. It's just maybe the area it's in is just having some challenges themselves. So
I agree that we don't necessarily terminate the program, but modify it, depending on our success,
Right.
our results.
One of the other key elements out of this with SOAR, and I'll stop, this is all stuff that we've been talking about through the SOAR process. And I think the critical element is when it goes through Chris's program, through the land bank program, we're ending up with a house that's code compliant, that's been updated, it's safe for whoever goes to occupy it. When it goes through the tax sale process, any number of outputs can occur. And this actually brings you a product back online that is code compliant.
No, I get the whole process. I think it's fantastic. I'm just saying that this might work in some parts of, in particular, the urban core where we see the greatest number of tax delinquencies. This might work in some neighborhoods and won't work in others.
Yep.
And I think for me, that's okay.
Yep.
I don't think we discontinue a program that's working somewhere just because it's not working somewhere else. So no, I like it. I think it's good. That's why I was asking about the numbers. At some point, I'm just giving you a heads up. I'm going to ask to see like a overall map of the areas where we've seen success versus not success with this program. And that should direct us where staff only has so much time, where they should be spending the bulk of their time in order to get the most properties for their time spent back on the tax roll. That's all I'm saying.
No, and I think that's great. I just wanted to get out the point that there's a real benefit to the land bank doing what it's doing here that you have approved as a governing body, because you're getting quality rehabs out into the community.
So I have a motion that we turn the conveyance of these properties into an administrative process supervised by the county administrator's office with a monthly report back to this committee.
Second.
Second.
All right, we have a motion in a couple of seconds. Would the clerk please read the roll?
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Murguia?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Walker?
Aye.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the end of the meeting. I will call it adjourned. I think we should move right on into economic development. Commissioner McKiernan.
Absolutely. We'll get just about 2 minutes for Mr. Alvey to get settled here and Mr. Fisher, and then we'll be ready to go.
It's been a while.
All right. You're all in place? So we'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome on any item that the committee considers. Anyone who wishes to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'd simply get the attention of one member of the committee. You'd come to the podium in the center of the room, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments to the committee. We do ask that anyone present who is speaking, please speak as directly as possible into a microphone for accurate recording and broadcast purposes. Roll call, please.
Roll call. Alvey?
Here.
Walters? Here. Murguia? Here. Townsend?
Present.
Walker?
Here.
McKiernan?
Here. Our first item of business is approval of our standing committee minutes from both the May 1st and June 5th, 2017 meetings.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to accept those minutes as submitted. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted, which brings us to our committee agenda. Item number 1 on our committee agenda is a presentation on stormwater rate transition analysis by Mr. Jeff Fisher from Public Works.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm sure you're familiar with Sarah White to my immediate right. She's our green infrastructure engineer. And then we have Anna White with Black & Veatch, subject matter expert, the two of them leading us through our stormwater fee analyses. We have two important objectives over the next couple of years regarding stormwater. One is the stormwater master plan, a 10-year capital plan. The second is the fee analysis to go along with that. They're on two separate but parallel tracks. We chose Black & Veatch, obviously for our fee analyses, obviously because they're qualified, but they're under contract and they've been working with BPU recently on some similar analyses. I'm going to hand over the presentation to Sarah White, and then we'll be glad to answer questions along the way.
Good evening. So I'm going to start first with just the history of our stormwater fee. The stormwater fee was established in 2009, and it was started at $2. And our stormwater fee is a flat fee. It's based on electric account, so it's attached to our BPU bill, and it started at $2. The last rate increase was effective January 1, 2012, and that went from $4 to $4.50. So this is, like I said, a flat rate that everyone who pays a BPU bill has on it, and it says it for the stormwater fee. And the revenue from this fee funds our maintenance program for all of our storm sewer assets in the county, our environmental compliance with EPA, that also funds that, as well as our capital improvement projects. The latest stormwater improvement project is the Stony Point Storm Sewer Enhancement that was paid for with these funds. This is just a map of the lime green colors, our current stormwater sewer system in the county. So what is the purpose of a stormwater utility fee? First thing, it mitigates the burden on our general funds, on property tax, and other tax sources. So with this fee, we're able to provide the funds for compliance with the EPA mandates that we're currently under with our consent decree, our new capital improvement projects, as well as maintenance for our entire storm sewer system, which not only includes our pipes and inlets and structures, but also includes things like Wyandotte County Lake, green infrastructure projects, those kind of things would be included. We want to match revenue to the service provided. So that's what we're looking at, is what is our stormwater program and what is it going to take to have a successful stormwater program. And then another objective is to create a fair and equitable rate structure. For example, currently Mr. Smith pays the same monthly fee as Mr. Mega Box Store. So we want to make sure that we are fair across the board. So a small house in Rosedale is paying the same amount as a large industry at the time, and that should be, or what we're looking at is having a different rate structure. So why are we doing this analysis? As Jeff said, we have contracted with Black & Veatch. They're going to be providing this study. And so some of the outcomes that we want to get is we want to recover costs in a fair and equitable manner. We want to look at using impervious area-based rates to reflect stormwater runoff. So a quick refresher on what impervious area is. So impervious area does not allow water to infiltrate. So your impervious area will be your roofs, your driveways, your roads, your sidewalks. So when you look at a parcel, there can be different impervious area depending on what type of land use that parcel is. If it's a large box store with a large parking lot, there might be very little impervious area on that parcel. If you look at a residential lot, your impervious area would be your house, your driveway, maybe a patio, but you would still have a lot of pervious area with your yard and gardens and native plants. We also, one of the outcomes is we want to align with the industry best practices. And at this time, that is using percent impervious for your stormwater fee. And Black & Veatch compiled a list of the metro area cities or our surrounding communities that currently have an impervious area-based stormwater fee. And those include Topeka, Lawrence, Casey-Bo, Wichita, Columbia, Missouri, Prairie Village, Kansas, and Mission, Kansas. So those are some of our surrounding neighborhood communities that do use this. We're also, as an outcome, we're going to look at our program needs. What does our stormwater program consist of, and how much money does it take to run it? And then looking at how we can enhance the level of service that we're providing with stormwater. So the project schedule, we are in phase 1 right now. We've just contracted for phase 1. This will run to March 2018. As Jeff said, we're also on a parallel track is our stormwater master plan. So the stormwater master plan will be providing the kind of the big picture of where our stormwater needs are in our current system. So that will be running in parallel to this, and we'll be able to say what our needs are and how much money it's going to take, so we know how much money we need. So phase 1, we're assessing program needs, developing multi-year financial plan. We're evaluating and developing impervious area-based fee. And with that, they're looking at the different alternatives. There's different ways that you can do the impervious-based fee. One of them is a flat rate per ESU, which stands for equivalent stormwater unit. So that would be based on your percent impervious. You would examine each parcel, and there would be a rate that you would multiply to your percent impervious, which would give you your fee.
Excuse me. So if there is anybody watching this on TV, could you define for me and the public, I mean, what are you going to include in impervious surface? I mean, I've got a driveway, water runs off the driveway into the street. I don't have any other impervious surface other than my roof to my house. That water comes off my house theoretically and is discharged into my yard, and unless we have a 10-inch rain, reabsorbed into the soil. So what will most people have as impervious surface?
It depends on the data that's available, but for a residential parcel, it is going to be the roof line, the base area of the house. We do have the option of picking up driveways if that data is available for us to determine the impervious area, the size of the driveway, large patios, if there's say a giant shed or a workshop in the yard. It depends on, once we get into the data available for us to analyze exactly what is available to us, but it will definitely be the size of the house, the footprint of the house. I
got to tell you, I'm gonna let you go on, but I got a really bad feeling where this is gonna lead to down the road. Really bad feeling that homeowners are gonna end up paying one hell of a price.
Well, okay. Okay. So that would be one option, is to have just a rate, percent impervious, and then you would get your fee. The other option would have where there would be two categories. You would do that percent impervious times the rate for your non-residential. And then in your residential category, you could have, usually you said about 3 to 4 tiers. So you'd have your 0 to 500 square feet, 500 to 1,000, and then you would just fit into those tiers, and then there would be a flat fee based on that. To your comment about homeowners, I think that the general, single residential family is not going to see much of an increase, if at all, based on these calculations. And this would all be, those fees and how much and everything Black & Veatch is going to look at the data and what it would give us, but that will be up to our advisory council, which would include commission, to determine that amount of money. And this is not going to be implemented, 100% the day of that we decide.
I know you believe that. And I want to tell you, I would like to believe that. But having been here when they started wastewater treatment, it wasn't going to cost the homeowner very much money. It was really going after the big guys. You're saying the box stores, and I'm saying they were going after the big guys, Procter & Gamble, Fairfax, etc. And I look at my bill, and they take a nice chunk every month. Doesn't look like a lot of money to some people, but it has grown appreciably. Now, I know it's more complicated than I'm sure whoever said that back then believed it. But I just think this whole method of assessment is so critical as to where is really the water running off from, and is it equitable to use, in your example, the roof line, because that's the only data we got. Shouldn't we look at the data that we can acquire, or do we not want to do that? I'm sorry, I'm in a foul mood to begin with, and the idea that we're going to add additional.
Okay.
He's the chairman.
Trust that.
Go ahead, Commissioner McKee. He's writing down some notes or something.
So I'm kind of in the same boat that Hal is. You guys, it looks like you've spent a lot of time and effort on this, and there's nothing more irritating than when you spend a lot of time and effort on something that you probably don't want to spend the taxpayers' money any more than we do. And then to have people complain already, and I think this is slide 1. So sorry in advance for that. I just want to, and I believe that this proposal or these potential solutions is addressing the cost of a federal mandate, correct?
It includes that, but it also is, as of right now, as I showed at the previous slide, we have not had an increase in our stormwater fee since 2012. So if you look back, what's the basis of these increases? We could have just keep increasing, but then people could say, well, that's not equitable, that's not fair, if you're just going to keep increasing it without the data to back it up. And this is what this is going to show, is what we could be getting if we use percent impervious, because the people that are going to be having a bigger fee are the big box stores, because it's based on percent impervious. It's not based on usage, which your wastewater is based on. It's based on footprint of your building. So that's not really I mean, it's what it is.
So if you were to go ahead.
I think what we anticipate and are preparing for is that the non-residential customer classes will see that fair and equitable thing, is that they're not paying what would be fair and equitable. When you compare it against residential, everybody's paying the $450. So we were actually going into this more worried about the impacts we could create on the non-residential. So we've talked about, and you'll see it in another slide, credit programs that would also be offered to the residential program. But in any case, I think what staff would end up recommending is a incremental long-term adjustment, not something that would be overnight. And I think Anna would tell you, and most cities go through this, that's what they end up doing. If it's 5 years or 10 years, it's gonna be incremental. There's no way we could propose the kind of change that we're gonna be considering in 1 year or 2 years.
So have you run any numbers just for samples on large, big businesses and where their bill would be based on what your proposal is, and how that bill compares to that same big box store in other counties that surround us? And I ask you this because even though this county has had some success in Western Wyandotte County in regard to economic development, we struggle to get business to locate in Wyandotte County as it is. And my concern is that it may seem like pennies, but when you're looking at a roof on a factory and you're counting stormwater coming off a roof like General Motors, what is that stormwater fee going to be? And I care about the residents also, but it's all in one, really. I mean, you really do have to care about both of them, because no one's going to live here if there's no business, and no business is going to come here if people don't live here. So it's chicken and the egg sort of here. So I do care about how much big business is charged, because we need big business to create more jobs for the people that live here. So what I care about is not necessarily as much of the details of your formula as if there's a Target in Midtown and what their stormwater fee is going to be based on whatever your formula is, and what is the stormwater fee for the Target on 119th Street out in wherever that is, Overland Park or Leawood, and how does that compare? Because we're already at a disadvantage in the terms of economic development. So that's my concern. And I know you've put a lot of thought into this, and I didn't mean to interrupt, but it does frighten me and make me want to react real quickly, because I know firsthand, because I personally work on community and economic development, and it's tough enough out west and in the Midtown area. You get to the city, it's virtually impossible to attract business. So I'm very concerned about that.
Sure. Thank you. I have a different concern regarding equitability. If I look at my house, we were annexed in 1965, and immediately the city imposed a sewer tax, and of course we had no sewers, and my dad had to threaten a lawsuit against the city to say that if you try to impose this tax for sewers, services we do not have, then we're going to challenge this in court, and so the city rescinded that. I kind of see a parallel here that I don't know if we are assessing or would send the same fee to everyone, the square footage of my house and my drive, so I understand the impervious surface, and I get that, I understand the formula, that makes good sense to me. But any of the stormwater that comes off of my roof or off of my driveway goes into the ditch, which goes underneath my driveway. The culvert for which I had to pay for out of my pocket, the city did not pay for that, and it ran to the house next door, and they have to pay for their own culvert, and then from there it dumps into the woods, which then goes to the creek. So as far as I can tell, the city does practically no maintenance on the stormwater runoff in our neighborhood. In fact, I live at the southwest corner of 49th and Douglas, and Douglas, as it heads east up the hill is Kansas Gas several years ago came through and installed new meters, and of course they had to dig into each of the ditches all the way down the street, and they did not restore those ditches to the original condition, so that the culverts, in fact, no longer function underneath driveways, and so now the water runs over driveways. In fact, I had to call the city on behalf of a neighbor. The water from heading down the street from Douglas was flowing over the northwest corner of his property, washing out his fence, and actually was going to wash out the utility pole there. So it doesn't seem to me equitable to be charging those who do not in fact have storm water sewers installed in their neighborhood to be assessed at the same level as those who actually have to pay to maintain the storm water infrastructure. So I think it's a different kind of question of equitability. And I'm not sure how we address that, but there are large areas of the county, especially those that were annexed, were townships that were annexed by the city, that were developed under the old county code or township codes, that do not have storm sewers. In fact, there's no plan to bring storm sewers. And it's, I have nightmares about water damage because, in fact, when we get heavy rains, as we did last week, my basement inevitably floods because of the number of springs underneath and it just fills the water table. I get that. That's the way it is. But there is a problem with the stormwater runoff for those areas that do not have actual storm sewers. Mm-hmm. And that to me is a concern.
Sure. And that, there's a few things there. One is that's why the stormwater master plan is important to identify where those needs are. The other, I think, part of that is we've got a big policies component to this effort. Policy decisions need to be made along the way. So there's a number of things that we'll need to address along the way, and we don't have answers for that right now.
And then also, this isn't only when we get the calls from people asking about the stormwater fee, and what we say is, that fee also is our compliance. So the water going into a creek, into the river eventually, that is, part of our compliance. So that is money that we need to fund those compliance efforts. So even if you're not have a structure, you are part of a stormwater system. You're part of the watershed, and that does, feed into that.
Okay, and I understand that, but my concern would be if the money is collected from those who do not have storm sewers installed already, they're going to be assessed at the same level as those who already do.
And that's how it is right now.
Well, then that money should go into an account that is going to fund the improvements. In other words, that I am paying now for eventual storm improvements. Because otherwise, I see no plan in place. No plan has been communicated that I know of to any of us in the neighborhood that we can expect to get sewers, sanitary sewers, much less storm sewers. And that's a problem.
And I think we can probably discuss that.
I'm just expressing my concern with that.
We can discuss that later about how, in some areas it doesn't make sense to have storm sewer. But that would be part of the master plan. And if we were to do any storm sewer enhancement or extensions at the time, and the way we're going with our current rate, we do not have the funds to do that. So that, and what we tell people that call in is that if you drive on the roads, you cross, culverts, those are all part of our infrastructure. So my point to this is if we're going to assess those with storm sewer installed and those who do not have storm sewer installed at the same level, then the ditches at least need to be maintained, and they are not being currently maintained.
Okay. Do you have anything to add on it?
Don't be afraid.
Well, I'm afraid my comments might go back to something that was said 10 or 15 minutes ago, and I apologize. I guess for that specific issue, the only thing I would add to that would be that, as Sarah mentioned, you travel on the public roads to go from place to place. You do benefit from the stormwater utility, even if you do not believe that you actually contribute any stormwater runoff into the system, you do benefit from the utility. So there is the fee does help pay for those costs.
And I would agree with that, and I understand that, but at the same time, I say there is a difference between those who have the stormwater infrastructure installed and paying that fee and those who do not and are not receiving the maintenance. So if this is to fund infrastructure projects and compliance, I get it. But the problem is I'm not seeing anything in many of these neighborhoods to improve the stormwater runoff in those neighborhoods. When I walk and talk to people, they point to their ditches, they point to their driveways, and they say, look at the water running down the street. It's going up and over my driveway, and it's eroding the driveway. They're told that you have to replace the culvert, but the problem is not being caused by them. It's being caused by up the street someplace else, and that is not being addressed.
And something that Mr. Alvey said earlier really speaks to a conversation that Mr. Fisher and I have had on more than one occasion, and that is, it is critical that contractors who come in to do work like replacing those gas lines and meters put things back the way they found them. And certainly, I've seen too many instances to count of them not putting stuff back the way they found it. And I know that we are currently really looking at right-of-way policies and what we hold them to, but it's critical. They can't come in and put a bunch of mini dams in a culvert and walk away, because that does upset the entire system as we've set it up to function now.
Commissioner, I think this is great conversation, and I think what we're kind of missing in this presentation is we may have reversed the order. And the German word is Wortordnung, where our words are out of order. What we're really talking about is we have a stormwater master plan we're doing, and that goes right at the heart of what Commissioner Alvey is talking about. We need to look at the entire totality of the community that we're covering with our utility, prioritize and help make sure that we're putting this where it's the best bang for its buck, and starts to knock away at those issues that our individual homeowners and businesses are seeing throughout the community. That's what our stormwater master plan will do. It's taking years of data that we haven't been able to act upon, and then it's looking at the bigger kind of geographic overlay and really trying to dive into that. From that, what we're trying to do is create a funding mechanism to start tackling those problems. Our current system as it stands does not do that. And what it looks like at the end, I know we're suggesting one thing. We're going to be looking at this. That's what Anna is here from Black and Veatch to do, to help us figure out how we meet the needs of the community. And then, of course, as policymakers, the standing committee, for instance, and also the governing body as a whole, are going to make that final determination on how that's rolled out, what that looks like, and go from there. So this is one concept. I think at the end of the day, what actually comes back based on the master plan informing this will have iterations and variations for you to look at. Yeah. If I'm wrong, Jeff, please correct me, but I just wanted to try to encapsulate what we're hearing and totally understand what you're talking about, because I worked out in the outer periphery of a county just to the south of us in a community that had many similar issues, and we addressed these very same things there too. And it takes that stormwater master plan to really start getting at the heart of the issues you're talking about.
And I agree with that. And I understand that. I would just suggest that, again, that if the same fee is assessed to everyone with different level of service, it is perceived as unfair, and it communicates to them that we're not paying attention to their situation and what they are already doing. And that's a danger for any city to communicate that.
Understood.
That's a really good taken note, that how we move forward on communication, as with everything that we do, has to be very well thought through and developed.
Well, to that point, what we have to communicate is we're being fair, and the fee will communicate where we are and what we're saying. It will communicate fairness if it's fair. If it's not fair, it will not communicate that.
No matter, I agree with Mr. Alvey. Yeah, it doesn't matter how you market it. You know, the fee is the fee. So I think you heard what we all had to say.
Okay. So the other thing in phase one is we'll be establishing a stormwater advisory committee, which will help with all of this. As you can see, there's the different parts of phase one. The stormwater master plan feeds into it, but we're looking at policy development, and we'll be having different workshops for these different things. Phase two and phase three will come after, and we're looking at whatever we come up with, whatever's decided on. It wouldn't be implemented until the January 2020 would be the first rollout of any kind of fee that we would do.
Let me just add a little bit here. As part of the scope for this phase one, there's two tasks that I think are worth mentioning. One is where we do a review of the jurisdictional and the service area and the level of service provided. So that is one of the tasks in the study, is to look at within the entire county, what are all the services that are being provided for stormwater, who's receiving what type of service, and how is that service currently being charged for, and how should it be charged? So that's one task that we will be looking at. Another one is policy development. So what we do is a very comprehensive policy workshop with the UG to talk about all the different, basically, policy decisions that need to be made as you go through a process like this, such as what kind of rate structure do you set up? Do you charge different fees for different levels of service? What kind of credits do you offer to homeowners or commercial owners in order to reduce their stormwater fee? And then, as Sarah mentioned, going along with this is we have the development of the Stormwater Advisory Committee. So this is a group of, we haven't identified all the participants yet, but 10 to 12 different representatives from the community, single-family homeowners, multifamily, condominium, neighborhood associations, industrial customers, hospitals, educational institutions, faith-based institutions. We try to bring in a representative from all the different areas that we can think of. And basically what we do is run all of this by them and say, what do you think? Tell us what you think, and what are you going to be hearing back from the community? And so we use that to help make the decisions that need to be made, make changes, to understand what the community impact and reaction is going to be to these changes.
So this was, this figure just kind of shows all the different, input that is needed for this a stormwater user fee. As Anna mentioned, having a impervious-based stormwater fee allows us to have a credit program. As you know, with our development, anything over an acre has green infrastructure or a stormwater treatment that has to be put in with that development. So this would allow, this would just align with our green infrastructure initiative that we're doing. It would be an incentive for people to have their BMPs up and running and working. So this would be something that could come in the future, would be a credit program. And people would have, some ability to control their fee. And this would be more for your larger industrial customers. Okay, any other questions?
I just have, this wasn't included in our agenda packet tonight, so do we have the ability to get copies of this?
Yeah, absolutely. We can email you the presentation if you'd like.
Please do. Mm-hmm. Any other comments or questions about this process?
It was a very good presentation. It's hard to hear. I mean, as politicians, we are the ones that usually get the complaints about the increase in costs and stuff. So your presentation was good and well thought out.
Well, hopefully with this, we'll have, if there's an increase, it will have the data to back up why there would be an increase.
And then if you just add that one piece on, I want to see where we compare in stormwater fees to other surrounding counties. Do you have any idea currently where we're at?
Well, we have just started this study, so we don't have any kind of preliminary rate based on impervious area developed yet. But that is part of the study. Once we get to that point, is to do a comparison of peer communities.
Mr. Alvey?
So I'd just like to comment, of course, with the Board of Public Utilities, we've employed Black and Veatch multiple times for our rate analysis, the class structure. Always found it very effective, and I think we've always come up with an equitable rate structure. And of course, it has to be adjusted every few years whenever you do that, but that's normal, and I think it's a good process. So I do trust the process.
Well, and that kind of goes to something that I was thinking of bringing up earlier. When you think about fair and equitable cost recovery, if you think about the water utility, you pay per gallon of water usage. So you pay for what you use, and the same thing for wastewater, you pay per gallon of contributed wastewater flow. When you talk about stormwater, if it's a flat fee based on your electric account, that's not based on anything related to stormwater runoff. Impervious area is the industry standard for developing a stormwater user fee, measuring the amount of stormwater that runs off of a property. And there's different ways to measure that stormwater. The most practical and accepted method is looking at the impervious area. So that's what we're trying to do here, is to do that match between who's contributing stormwater runoff to the amount that they're paying.
Do other counties do that?
Yeah.
It would seem to me, I mean, you can't meter the water coming off. You can meter the water coming in to your house, but you cannot meter the water leaving the house. It's just not possible. You have no idea what the absorption rate of the soil is underneath. You can estimate, but the impervious surface makes sense as the industry standard.
Do we have to bill back the UG for when your neighborhood floods? Do we get to bill you so much per gallon of water that floods back onto their property? I mean, there are some areas, like in District 3, we have a pump house, but they're still, just in the storm that we just had, it's not my district, but it is still in Argentine. It's the lower area of Argentine Boulevard was completely under water. So there wasn't, I mean, that's not even a storm sewer working. I mean, I don't even know what that is. It's just.
Yeah. Well, most of those are designed for a 5-year event, and that was a 15 to 20-year event that happened, so it wouldn't handle that anyways.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear these 5-year and 10-year unpredictable storms and stuff, but I can tell you I live there, and I can tell you there's been flooding in the last 15 years, at least 10 times. So I don't know why, I mean, they keep referring to 5-year and 10-year torrential downpours, because we lost a couple cars, me personally, lost a couple cars in the flood and, you know, the latter 90s. And so I just know it happens. That's what I'm saying. Then how do we make that fair and equitable for people that, you know, are in those areas? I don't know. I don't know. It's just frustrating when you represent that area and people that you represent and you care about are standing in 4 feet of water, and they don't have any money to begin with, and the car they do have is bobbing around in the water. So that doesn't seem very fair and equitable to me. But I'm not arguing with you. I'm just telling you from the street level, from politicians being in the trenches day to day, dealing with these people who know we're elected officials. They're going to complain to us, and we see that. You know, we're held accountable every day to the decisions that we make. So, again, it really was a good presentation. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying it might be also be bad timing to bring up stormwater given the torrential downpour we just had.
Well, and I think the master plan will highlight a lot of those issues and bring those to our attention, as well as Sarah mentioned at the very beginning, looking at the current program costs and then looking at the enhanced level of service. So taking into account the findings of the master plan and what additional services need to be provided to the public to avoid issues like that.
Okay, one last thing, and then I won't belabor it. And I don't want to get, Mr. Walters brought this up once before, and been meaning to talk to him about it anyway. There is in the lower areas of the city that are closest to the river that have experienced flooding, the unified government's approach when there is torrential downpour, sometimes people's sewers in their homes back up. And because they're combined sewers, I don't know how that works, but because they're combined, it comes, not just stormwater comes back up through their drains. The Unified Government's policy has been simply to put some sort of trap device, I don't know what the name of it is, I just know it's a trap, that when there's that potential, the trap shuts. But that doesn't, then the people in the structure are not allowed to flush their toilet or take a shower or wash their clothes or do any of that. And I know that I brought it up, I know that recently Commissioner Walters brought it up, and that's just deemed as acceptable, that when it rains hard, you can't take a shower or wash your clothes or go to the bathroom. And that's really not very practical. And so if we're gonna take into considerations and we're gonna charge people different rates, I happen to represent an entity that owns 17 apartment units where that was the solution to the problem, where these 11 people were expected to not shower or go to the bathroom while it rained.
Any other comments, questions? Look forward to the process. Thank you very much for making your presentation tonight.
Thanks for your time.
That brings us to item number 2 on our agenda tonight, and that is a second quarter budget revisions report submitted by Reginald Lindsay.
Good evening, committee members. For the second quarter, we had 2 budget revisions that were over $10,000. They were in legal and also with the Sheriff's Department. Any questions on 2 transactions that occurred? No, it's...
And once again, you're bringing these as a report, not as seeking action on them, just reporting that they have happened. This actually was in the original agenda that was published, a single page after the
It would, I don't know the actual page on it, but it looks like this.
Tracking number 171227, reverse side.
Oh, so it's not that report, it's
Yeah, it's right there. Looks like that.
you can't trust my page numbers.
Commissioners, we have 4 presentations, and the first one starts with the budget revisions, because we present to you the budget revisions. So that's what Reggie's talking about. The second one will be the report, the quarterly report.
Right. So any comments or questions about these 2 budget revisions?
We don't do anything, so.
That is correct.
Okay. Move on.
Mr. Lindsay, thank you very much. Brings us to our third item on the committee agenda, which is the report of second quarter budget to actual, and that will be Kathleen Von Atchen and Reginald Lindsay.
Good evening. So this is the report where we're going to discuss how our budget is performing, and we have 50% of the budget, or the year has passed as of June 30. So we're presenting to you both how the revenues have performed and the expenditures have performed. The first slide that we're going to look at here is the consolidated general fund. As you know, the general fund is the largest operating fund of the unified government. So here we have a comparison of the budget in last year, along with how much was spent last year through June 30. And then the next columns are the budget for this current fiscal year, 2017, along with how much has been spent or collected in revenues through June 30. And so the key point here that I thought I should note is that last year, revenues came in at 60% at June 30, where this year they're at 61.8%. So revenues are coming in a little higher than we expected compared to budget. Now, I did want to point out this budget number is the amended budget number that you just adopted several weeks ago. So things are looking good. Now, why is this number not 50%? Why is it higher than 50%? Well, most of the reason is because property tax comes in pretty much all at the beginning of the year. And so that's why it kind of skews how much revenue. It's not seasonal. It doesn't come in the same increments throughout the year. So that's a little higher. Yes.
I have a question. So is that how much are we ahead in dollars? How much are we ahead in collections this year in dollars?
So if you were, well, we will look at that later. That's not showing up here exactly, but.
And then why the, do you know why the increase in revenue?
Well, we're gonna talk about that in more detail in the other slides. Now, on the expenditure side, this is kind of the big summary picture here. So on the expenditure side, we were last year 49% of total expenditures, whereas right now in the current year we're 47%. So we're spending a little bit less than what we budgeted compared with last year also, and then we've collected more than we've budgeted. As a result, we've got a net, positive of around $28 million compared with last year's 17. Now, as we approach the end of the year, this revenue number will be somewhat different because the property tax has already been collected. So then we're just relying on all those other revenue sources. That's the big overview. Now, as you know, the general fund has 3 different funds in it. It's the city general fund, the county general fund, and then the consolidated parks general fund. So all of those amount to that total $206 million, those 3, right? So we're going to provide a little bit more detail here on the city and county general funds because they're the largest one. The consolidated parks fund is only around $6 million. It's not very big. So we're just going to focus on these 2 larger ones, the city and the county. And then these 2 slides are the revenue slides, and then Reggie's going to talk about the expenditure slides. So on the revenue side, what we do when we're looking at performance, right, we want to compare it to budget. We also want to compare it with how much we collected during that same period last year again. So this is comparing how much we've collected so far this year compared with what we thought we would be, or what we estimated for the budget for the current year. And again, see that property, so overall 54% of the revenue that we've collected that we budgeted, right? Now, why is that higher than 50? Well, partly because some of these revenues are not necessarily coming in at a steady seasonal rate. Some of the revenues coming in at higher rates depending on what part of the year you're in. But also, property tax, those payments are due, tell me again, I forgot already, May and December. So all they're due January 20th.
Well, they're due December 20th.
Yeah, but they trickle in January, and then again, then in May. So that's when they're all due. The sales tax is right on what we estimated at 50%. Some of these other items are, these are a little higher than we estimated, right? This table built over here compares how much we've collected so far with the same period of last year. And you can see all of these indicators, these 3, and which is property tax, sales tax, other taxes, intergovernmental revenue, and fines and fees and miscellaneous are coming in higher than we collected last year. What hasn't come in higher is permits, which is building permits, and that's partly because we have changed the special fee waiver that we had in place last year, right? And what else? Charges for service, because our municipal court fines are down somewhat based on a change in procedure and policy related to police citations, so. All right, now on the county general fund side, you can see that the county general fund is collecting 34 million. We've got it as 35 million in total in property tax. Overall, the property tax makes up a much larger portion of the total revenues for the county general fund. So as a result, the fact that we've collected 95% of all the property tax already in this fund really makes this revenue number higher. It's 79% compared with the city general fund, which has a more diversified revenue structure, so it's only 54%. So highly reliant on property tax, the county. And sales tax coming in as we have anticipated. Other taxes are all doing well. Compared with last year, again, these are higher than the prior year. These are all coming in higher. Property tax, sales tax, other tax, intergovernmental charges for services, fines and fees. What isn't coming in higher, again, is the same. The permits for the same reason. And I think that's the only one. Okay, now Reggie's going to talk about the city expenditure side.
The 2017 budget to actuals, which are on the right-hand side, we can see that personnel is 47.8% of the budget. That's actually good. We want expenditures to be around 50% at this point in time of the year. We're a little bit below in personnel because we have some vacancies, and then we also have some payout forecasts that are not at the level that we expect them to be at yet. Also, we can see capital outlay is a little bit below the 50%. It's at 28.8%. That we still have some capital to pay out. We have some capital leases that haven't been booked yet. And then in grants and claims, we did raise the budget here, and we had some unexpected claims we had to pay out, but since we raised the budget, we're okay here. If we look at it and we compare 2016 actuals in grants and claims, or miscellaneous, or grants and claims, we can see that we're a little bit over what we paid out last year in grants and claims, and that's the budget revision that I did with the $508,000 on the legal side. For the most part, we can see that we are below 50% here, and that's where we want to be ideally in the city general fund. On the county general side, we can see the bottom line of the 2017 budget actuals. We are at 50%, which is basically where we want to be. We have a couple line items that are above at 55.6%. We have grants and claims. Grants and claims have been running a little bit over this year because of settlements we've had. Also, personnel on the county side it's a little bit more. Over in the sheriff's department, we have some vacancies with deputies, which has created a little bit more overtime, which has caused the personnel to be a little bit more than we expected. Capital outlay, the same thing we have going on in city general fund. We have some capital leases that have not been booked yet, which we will book. And we can kind of see we pretty much kind of the same comparison as 2016 actuals. We're kind of right in line with what we spent in 2016. I'll turn it back over to Kathleen.
So as I mentioned before, the general fund has three funds. The consolidated general fund has three funds in it. the actual unified government, all the financial statements, there's 30 different funds. So this is an accounting of all those 30 funds and how they're doing so far this year. So the blue columns over on the right, or maybe the left, the right, yeah, no, the right, are all the revenue columns, and then the orange ones are the expenditure columns. We've presented the amended budget, the actuals through June 30, and then the percentage of budget there. The largest funds that we often look at are the city general fund, the city bonded interest fund, where we pay the debt service, the county general fund, again, the consolidated general parks fund, the county bonded interest fund. So as you can tell, they're broken up by, these are all the tax levy funds, and then here's all the other types of funds. Those are special revenue funds. They're also enterprise funds and so forth. So all of these, you know, they have kind of different funding sources. Generally speaking, these top funding sources, they rely on tax revenue and property tax revenue, whereas these down below rely on fees and other special revenues that are specifically dedicated by law to support the respective functions of these funds. So I just wanted to show you that you can see how all these property tax levy funds, their revenues are coming in at 63 or 64% of, instead of the expected level of 50, and that's because that property tax, you know, is collected at the beginning of the year. In fact, some of these heavily reliant funds are at 90% here. For example, the county bonded interest fund is at 88%, aging, the developmental disabilities fund, the health fund, the elections fund, they're all at 90%. Because that's how much basically of their total revenues are coming from that property tax. The current year budget had a 2 mil reduction. So that 2 mil reduction is reflected in this top line right here. And then for 18, for next year's budget, there's another 2 mil reduction. But, all the other funds supported by property tax, they continue to collect the same mill rate as they had previously, just so you know. On the expenditure side, we see again that 43%, you know, it's lower than the 5%, and that's just because there's different levels of spending based on what the needs are. For example, some of the functions, especially the bonded interest funds for the city and the county, those expenditure levels are really dependent on when the debt service payment is due. And since we have so many various debt service payments and they're not necessarily due equally throughout the year, those numbers can be skewed. So that's why it's 21% there and 12% there. So obviously those debt service payments are being made later in the year. So going down here, the largest non-tax or, you know, other special revenue funds are the dedicated sales tax and the Emergency Medical Services Enterprise Fund. Both of those are supported by sales tax and other revenues. The other larger ones are down here. The stormwater, or sewer, stormwater, the Street and Highway Fund, and then the travel and tourism, which is supported by transient guest tax. So. And by the way, I just noticed these two here are off a little from the 50% mark, and that's probably also what I called it seasonality. There's a probably higher demand during the summer months, or later months. Here, there's a little variance off the 50% up here. These two, the Emergency Medical Fund and and the Emergency Medical Services Fund and dedicated sales tax. Dedicated sales tax is off the 50% or lower than the 50%, probably because a good deal of those costs are capital, and capital isn't always spent evenly throughout the year. So that concludes our presentation on the financial performance, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
I appreciate you pointing out that the bond and interest funds probably reflect payments that have yet to be made but are still budgeted, so I appreciate that. What is CIFI?
Well, that's a fund we're going to be discontinuing very soon, but we had to make one small entry in order to close that accounting entry.
All right,
in
that's
order
what I
to
want to
close
know
out.
why it was
But
reflected.
you can tell me what it is. What is it?
County Initiative Financing.
Yeah.
Infrastructure.
Okay. Any comments or questions from members of the committee?
I have a question. So, what I was really looking for, and maybe it's here, is how much more money is the city general fund collecting this year than they did last year? I know you gave a prior year, current year on the consolidated general fund, but and I see that it's about $9 million up. Is all that in the city? Or do you know how much of that is in city versus county versus parks? Or?
Yeah, if you go to, on the revenue side, if you go to page 2 of the quarterly report,
Okay.
you will see that the amount of revenue that was collected greater than the amount collected for the same period last year was $5.6 million. And that increase was because of the sales tax. Now, that's because in 2016, we're not collecting the Star Bond revenue. So that's why.
So that's $6 million, but am I correct that the consolidated?
And then, okay, and then the county one is on the next page, is on page 4. On page 4 of the report, and that was 3.9 million. Do you see that in that second table? And that was because property tax increased by $2 million, or property tax revenue collections were $2 million more in 17 than they were in 16. And my guess is that's because assessed value has been improving, because the mill rate remained the same in the county.
Yeah, so it's almost $4 million, isn't it?
Yeah.
42 to essentially 46.
Well, yeah, 2 million was the big one. There's also improvements in sales tax and other taxes and other financing sources, or other things, but half of the 4 million came from property tax.
So the city increase in revenue reflects mostly the sales tax, but it also reflects the 2 mil property tax reduction, right?
That's correct.
So even with those, we're still $5 million year to date.
But due to those increases, we're up.
Due to the increases and due to the mill reduction, we're net
Yeah.
5 million year to date.
But only for the first 2 quarters. It's not,
Right.
yeah.
Understand?
Yeah, I just want to be clear. It was just for the 2 quarters, not the 4.
Okay. Thank you. I guess that's what I was asking for.
Good, good.
Any
And
other comments or questions?
A comment. It's a very good report, Kathleen, and I really struggle in this area. I'll just tell you, I've tried to read these before, and unless you're sitting by me, they're really hard to understand. I think it's just the nature of all the different funds that we have and the complexity of the work that we do, and you've been very helpful and cooperative. My only feedback would be that when we use percentages and the budget changes from year to year, in my mind, that's not really comparing apples to apples. You know, so I'm going to make up numbers because I don't want to have to find them. So last year we collected $30 million in property taxes, and then this year we collected $35 million. And then you base that on percentages. When you look at each budget line item, I don't think that percentage is really reflective of whether we saved or gained, or, you know, saved on expenditures or not. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, absolutely. A lot of these percentages are a percentage of the percentage of the budget number.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
not necessarily reflecting increase.
Not a trend. It's, you're not looking at a trend. I know what you're looking at. For me, I like the detail as an option, but I'm more interested in the overall trend from a policy-making perspective. Are we trending in the right direction?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
and we're definitely going to continue to provide that information as part of the long-term financial plan. You know, because then we've got multi-year, and we're showing that trend line. But yeah, we should look into that for these quarterly reports.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Other comments or questions? Thank you for the second quarter report. And I think that brings us to item number 4, which is our second quarter investment report.
Thank you. Trying to see the clicker. This will be the quarterly investment report for second quarter 2017. The first page is the investment summary page. Basically shows the total portfolio by type of investment. Line 1 right here indicates portion of property tax collections to be distributed to other governmental entities. And then the bottom, the total portfolio line here reflects the UG's portion of the portfolio.
I did want to just make a point here that right now, as of June 30, 36% of the total portfolio has been retained as liquids in order to satisfy obligations that we are expecting to pay out in the coming 3 quarters or coming quarter or so, 3 months. And so I just wanted to point out that seems a little high, and that's because on August 1st, we made a debt service payment of roughly $25 million to a variety of, you know, debt service paying agents. So that drew down that cash number. So that's why it's high. Oh, and maybe we could go back a little more. And by the way, the total investment earnings for the portfolio as of the end of the quarter is 1.17%, which is better than the previous quarter, which was 0.99%. So it increased 17 basis points in 1 quarter.
The next page is the compliance. The next page is the compliance report. Shows that the UG in compliance with the investment policy, with the exception of the 30% limit within a single institution. Third quarter investment strategies will bring the UG in compliance with its investment policy. There's a note here, the 30% limit within a single banking institution per the policy parameters was exceeded. Cap Federal Bank holdings totaled 32% of the portfolio. In the next quarter, they will be adjusted, as I mentioned earlier. This is due to we revised the investment policy from the 30% limit was at 60%, and with the revision of the investment policy, it brought it to 30%, which threw Cap Federal over the limit.
Yeah, so sometimes it's a little tricky to make sure those investment holdings fall within the lower percentages at 30%, because you know sometimes we end up using more cash or liquid cash, and it brings down that denominator and changes the percentages. So my hope is that, you know, my hope is that we diversify our issuers, right, or banks that we do investments with, so that all of them were roughly in the 25% range, or well, not all of them, because we have more than 4, but any of them less than 25 to 27 in order to mitigate that percentage. The more diversified we are, then the safer the portfolio and our money is. So, by the way, let's go back, because I do want to point out that this green line here on this graph demonstrates how our yield is improving. So you can see that it's an upward trend. Now, the reason for that is naturally the Fed has increased rates, so that certainly is partly a contributor, but also we're very carefully managing the portfolio to make sure we don't have too much cash sitting around, and cash doesn't earn a lot of money. So that's what we're trying to do, is make sure we're properly invested and in a diversified way. The last thing is the size of the portfolio has improved from, let's measure it for June 15, which was at the $180 million level, and now we're at $208 million. So just to compare apples to apples, the size of the portfolio is increasing. And part of that, the reason for that is because all of you are now complying with or working towards the target of maintaining our reserves at higher levels in order to make sure that we have the funds available in case there's an emergency. So, keeping that, for example, the general fund reserve policy of 10%, those reserve policies are what's showing up here in that blue area.
The next page is the issuer detail. It gives you detail by issuer. Our banks are by the federal government agencies that issue various securities. It shows that the percentage right here shows you the percentage that each institution has within our portfolio.
So I just want to interject. So and it goes to the next item we have on the agenda, which is our efforts to improve the local emphasis toward efforts to work with more of our local banks. Oops.
Did I do that?
That effort has resulted in Security Bank improving their portfolio level. Liberty Bank was already in place, so they were there before the last quarter. But we're working on this little by little. It takes a little while to get the banks more involved in our portfolio or an investment program. And then the other thing is the weighted maturity days, 374. We're working towards extending that longer to the 4-year level, because the longer the maturities are, the better investment rate you get. So.
Kathleen, how do we determine who we're banking with? Because it looks like here most of our banking is done with CapFed.
Yeah.
So how do we determine who we're picking to bank with?
Yeah. So what happens is, we have this policy in place, and the last policy establishes that no more than 30% is for any given bank, right? The way in which the investments are selected is that we Lisa can talk about this in detail, but the bids are sent out to the investment community or to the banking community, requesting whether there's any interest to basically to sell us any kind of investments, whether they're agency or instrumentalities from the federal government, or if they're just CDs, right? And so we tell them the parameters that we're looking for in terms of how long a period of maturity we need, and then what the the required rate is. And the required rate is set by statute. So then we give them, I don't know, a week or a few days to come back. And then we get this list of what they bid back, and then we make that selection based on the criteria that's in our investment policy and then what's in state statute. And I should point out that the legislative auditor is very involved in the investment program. So, you know, you know, it's all very, very highly regulated. So.
I have a question, sir. So could you tell me the current process that we use to determine when we might increase the amount of cash we pay versus bonding expenditures? What I'm thinking of is if we have a year where our revenues are actually greater than we projected them to be, it seems like we have a decision to make with what to do with that money. Do we just add it to the reserve, or could we think about not bonding some projects but instead paying cash? When is that strategic decision made, and how do we come to that decision?
So, well, that's part of the budget process, and so the issue with here in Kansas is that the budget is adopted at the end of July, right? For the year that doesn't even start until January.
Mm-hmm.
So really knowing whether our revenues are coming in better than we expected in the current year is difficult because we're only looking at the first or second quarter, you know. So typically, if the financial performance of a given year is proving to be better than expected, that will show up in the January and February year, so the subsequent year. So there's typically not a correction in the current year in order to accommodate those sorts of performance issues, right? So if there's extra money, it just goes to fund balance, and then that money is reflected in our financial planning when we do the budget for the next year. Do you understand?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
Okay.
But if we wanted to change...
Because of the statutory requirement to have the budget adopted by, I think it's August 15th, we have to have it done, so, yeah.
Okay, but at some point, we do have to decide what we pay for in cash and what we bond, right?
So yes, so
during the budget process.
Assume that if you know, naturally any extra money that comes in at the end of the year, you can consider that one-time money, okay? And so it would make sense to spend that extra one-time money on capital projects because they're one-time.
Or on reducing our debt.
Right, and so how much we subsequently, the next year, spend on capital and the mix between cash and debt is part of that whole capital improvement program conversation. Yeah.
Well, in a time of ever-increasing revenue, we also have ever-increasing debt. And I was just wondering if we could maybe spend some time at some point in the future at one of these finance committee meetings actually delving into that a little bit more.
Yeah. So, and it's helpful that, well, even through the third quarter, we know that, you know, how our performance is doing, whether we're up or down. And so I plan to incorporate those sorts of estimates as we present the long-term financial plan. So the thought is to do a long-term financial planning session with the commission like we did last year in the fall, so that all of you are thinking about where are we, how are we doing, how are we performing, what kind of, and those kind of questions can then be hashed out and discussed before we enter into the budget process that starts in January, February. So you'll be having that presentation in a couple of months. We haven't picked the date yet, but sometime. probably November.
The final page is the transaction details. It's just the list of transactions that occurred during the second quarter. We invested $40 million. And so this area here tells you the investments we made with which institution and how much, the interest rate. And then this section here is maturities, investments that matured that quarter.
So we had, we spent down $7.7 million in cash, and we had 22 or 10 million mature. So the 40 million basically is offset slightly by the 10 million that matured. We just basically reinvested the 10 million. And the whole point of this is to bring down our liquidity levels so that we have better interest rates. You see the liquidity levels at 0.9 or 0.886, you see, and where if you invest at longer rates than you got, for example, the 4-year rate or the 3.5-year rate is 1.8. So it's better to invest the funds just a little bit longer than the short-term rate. So we're just trying to redistribute and restructure the portfolio so that we gain a better yield and keep it safe.
Any other comments or questions from the committee? Thank you for that report. I think that brings us to the fifth and final item on tonight's agenda, and that is our local bank emphasis investment policy.
Yes, so this is a just quick presentation just to give you a kind of a recap on some of the questions that had been raised in the past during our meetings. So right now, the investment policy, which is about 11 or 12 pages, has this one section here, it's section 14B, which talks about how we want to encourage our banks that have local branches to invest, to participate in the city's investment portfolio. And so these are eligible financial institutions with a main or branch office in Wyandotte County. And our local emphasis program is to offer a $235,000 CD to every one of all these local banks. But the CD has to earn at least or greater than the interest rate based on the published rate in the Wall Street Journal, and that's what this KSA 12-1675A is. All right, so here it is. So basically the rate has to be exactly the same as what's in the Wall Street Journal. So this is a little difficult for a lot of the smaller banks because these smaller banks have certain capitalization requirements that are set by their national offices. So they don't have that discretion to kind of change their rates. And then secondly, it costs them more. And the reason it's only $235,000 is because it's insured by FDIC. So there's no collateral requirement. But still, this requirement in the code it makes it difficult for some of these local banks to actually participate in our program because they don't typically pay this level of an investment rate on their CDs. So anyway, I just want to give you, this is a little recap of all the local our banks and how much, we've been working little by little on improving the local bank emphasis. So you can see Security Banks went up $5 million, and Cap Fed increased $12 million. All right. So now this coming quarter, in the current quarter we're in, the third quarter, what we did was we reached out to all of the banks, and which there was about 7 or 8, And I called and talked to them personally, tried to find out, what is it that we can do to have you and participate in this program. And so here's the published rate that, as I mentioned, as of this date, it was for a 1 year, it was 1.23, and for a 2 year, it's 1.37. And so when I reached out to these banks, Liberty Bank, for example, they could only offer 0.4, and so they had to decline because they're way below those percentages. Bank Midwest, they made an offer, and we accepted it at 1.3. So for a 2 year CD, of course, these are only $235,000 because they're insured by FDIC. If they have to be collateralized, it costs the bank more money. So that's why they some of these banks don't want to participate or in our investment portfolio, because then they have to collateralize it, and it takes money out of their, their circulation there. So First Federal Bank, they declined the offer because the rate was too high. Security Bank, they accepted the 1.2 rate for 12 months. And then Commerce Bank, they already are at the 30% cap, as well as Capital Federal. But Capital Federal and Commerce Bank are both going to be at the cap, so that we didn't call them. So anyway, so we're just we're doing our best to try to bring in as many banks as we can into our portfolio and establish those relationships.
Appreciate bringing this forward because we have discussed this several times. Are there any comments and questions regarding this last item? Fantastic. Thank you so much for the information. We really do appreciate it. There are no more items on our agenda. We are adjourned.